Okay, well, correct me if I'm wrong. We got a good start on the apology. We talked about the charges against Socrates. We spent a lot of time kind of setting things up, and we also talked about his investigations, right? How he heard about the oracles, the prophecy that he was the wisest, or that none were wiser than him, and he had to go figure out what this meant, right? So, what did it mean? We went over that, didn't we? I mean, he went to go talk to all these different people who had a reputation for being wise. In each case, he showed how they were not wise. And what did it really boil down to usually? Why were they not wise?
Arrogance.
Yeah, it was something to do with arrogance. Like they thought they were wise, especially in matters which, like the craftsmen. They knew their trade, but they didn't know anything else, right? And, I'm good at this one thing. I'm a politician. I'm good at persuading people. If I'm a poet, I'm good at writing poems. Or if I'm a craftsman, I'm good at my craft. So therefore, I know everything. And this was a mistake. They thought they had wisdom where there was none. And Socrates, at least he admits when he doesn't know something. And I guess this is what makes him wiser. Well, so what does he think that means, though? What is the oracle trying to tell him? Did we get that far last time?
He was wise because compared to the gods, they were not smart. And he realized that, but nobody else did.
Right, so there's this divine wisdom, which is going to trump human wisdom. And so he's the one that acknowledges this, right? And so let me try to find this page exactly where he gives us the, I guess, the punchline. And I think I already read this last time, but I guess it bears repeating. This is on page 91. That first column. In the margin, what is it, 23, about a line above the 23. As a result of this investigation, I acquired much unpopularity of a kind that is hard to deal with and is a heavy burden. Many slanders came from these people and also a reputation for wisdom, for in each case, the bystanders thought that I myself possessed the wisdom that I proved my interlocutor did not have. That's another point I think we dwelled on a bit last time. I know this happens to me a lot. Whenever I get in conversations with people, especially like about political issues where they feel very strongly about one side or the other, I'm a little bit down the middle, so I tend to be critical of both sides, and usually when I criticize, the people on the left or the right, they always assume that I disagree with them, or that I well then you must believe what the right wing believes or the left wing or whatever. And sometimes it's just, I don't have the answer. I don't know. You're just acting like it's so simple, right? Oh, geez, what do we get into this weekend?
Oh, I emailed you last night.
Oh, okay.
This weekend.
Wow. Well, let's make room for you here. Do you want to sit maybe behind this desk here? Or?
Just wherever I can. I have a little room.
Okay. Well, I can make some space here. Let me kind of pull this aside, and then maybe you can use this desk to get behind it a little bit easier, probably. I don't know, is this enough room for you here on this desk here, you think? Okay, cool. Put the light sign in here. Wait, watch out, I'll be stuck if I don't get out of there. Okay. Alright, so, again, I was making this point about, when you're critical of somebody else's viewpoint, they often assume that, well, hey, this guy must have all the answers, right? And Socrates always gets accused of this, right? But remember, he's very insistent. I don't have the answers. I don't know anything. And ironically, maybe even paradoxically, this is what makes him wiser. Okay? But what was the oracle trying to tell us when the oracle said that there were none wiser than him? What is probable, gentlemen, is that in fact the God is wise, and that his oracular response meant that human wisdom is worth little or nothing. And that when he says this man Socrates, he's using my name as an example. As if he said, this man among you mortals is wisest, who, like Socrates, understands that his wisdom is worthless. So even now, I continue this investigation as the God bade me. And I go around seeking out any one citizen or stranger whom I think wise. Then if I do not think he is, I come to the assistance of the God, and I show him that he is not wise. Because of this occupation, I do not have the leisure to engage in public affairs to any extent, nor indeed to even look after my own, but I live in great poverty because of my service to the gods. And we were already talking about this last time, now I'm starting to remember. How is this working in his defense? Well, indirectly, he's trying to give us a sense of why he's got this reputation, why the accusers might be out to get him, and so why they might be biased against him. But these last few lines about doing a service to the god, I mean, isn't this sort of directly addressing one of the charges? And how so?
Well, it shows that he works for the gods and he believes in the gods, so he can't be impious.
Impious, right.
If he's so with the gods. I mean,
Why did he even get started asking questions? Because he heard the god said something about him and he took it seriously, right? I mean, he might not have taken it at face value. It must be a riddle. It must mean something, but I need to find out what that meaning is. And so he continues with this throughout the dialogue. We'll see he characterizes his role in that society as a sort of divine, as he puts it later, a gadfly. He uses that metaphor later on. We'll see. Well, we're not done with the defense just yet, right? This isn't all he does to defend himself. Just tell you, oh, well, I've got a bad reputation. I'm doing this because God said so. He also addresses the second charge directly, but he does this through a sort of cross-examination. After, I think, he's listened to the charges and listened to the accusers, he starts to doubt the sincerity, perhaps, of, well, one particular accuser, and that's Meletus, right? I think, he's got some bad things to say about all of them, but in this next section, he seems to be picking on this guy, Meletus. And what does he do? Well, he does several things, but the first is he asks Meletus, okay, look, guy, you seem so concerned with our youth, right? You seem so concerned with their well-being, but I don't think you really are. I think this is just the appearance of a concern. In reality, you've just got you've got something against me. And how does he prove this? Well, Meletus, sorry. How does he go about proving this? Well, he asks Meletus a few questions. He says, you're concerned with the corruption of the youth. Well, tell me, Meletus, who improves the youth? Who is it that improves the youth? Or what is it that improves the youth? What is the initial answer that we get from Meletus here? How do I improve the youth? What improves the youth? Or who? What's that? That's the first thing Meletus says, and I don't think Socrates likes it. He's like, you know what I mean, Meletus? Not what improves them, but who, what people improve the youth. And there's a bit of a back and forth. It takes a while to get the full answer, but what does Meletus eventually say? Who improves the youth? Well, does he say the gods? I don't know if he does say the gods. I don't think so. He just starts flattering all the people that are there, basically. Right? What does he say? The counselors, do they improve the youth? Yes. The jury, do they improve the youth? Yes. All the citizens of Athens, all the Athenian citizens, do they improve the youth? What does Meletus say? Yes, everybody improves the youth. Everybody, except who? Except for Socrates. What's Socrates doing here? How does this point out a flaw in Meletus's accusations? Well,
trying to show the jury that I guess it's only directed towards him. Like he might have a grudge against him.
right, Meletus has a bias. Okay, I mean, how could you ever say that everybody improves the youth? This is where we get that analogy with horses, right? If I have a horse and I want it to improve in health or whatever, do I take it just to anybody? I guess we could update this, right? If I have a car and it's broken, right? If the transmission goes out, do I just go to anybody to fix it, right? I just go knock on my neighbor's door. Hey, I don't know how to fix cars. You do it, right? You go to somebody who has knowledge, right? You go to the mechanic and I guess hope they don't, rip you off. But you go to somebody with knowledge. And so wouldn't it be a great world that we live in? Everybody improves the youth except for this one guy, Socrates. That would be pretty simple. If we just get rid of this guy and all of our youth would be improved. But it's obvious that, obviously Meletus is just saying anything to get people on his side, to make Socrates look bad. And for Socrates, this is even worse than the Sophists, because it doesn't even have a semblance of truth. At least their arguments sound nice, but when we investigate, we find out they're not. This one is it's straight up wrong. Although I think, Socrates should have stopped here, to be honest with you. I think some of these other arguments, he's pushing it. He does catch Meletus in a contradiction, and that's good. But before he goes to do this, he says something more about corruption itself, right? The nature of corruption. And what does he say about corruption? He says that, look, if I associate with people who are themselves corrupt, what is going to happen to me eventually? I become corrupt, right? If I'm hanging out with corrupt people, no matter how hard I try, that corruption he thinks is going to sort of bleed off and affect him, right? And nobody wants to corrupt themselves. That's sort of something he says and asserts. Nobody wants to be corrupt. So they wouldn't want to associate with corrupt people. Well, who does Socrates associate with more often than not? Who does he hang out with? You might not have gotten this from the text. I mean, maybe if you read that chapter before on Socrates. Who's he hanging out with more than anybody else? All these old fuddy-duddies who don't like him? No, he's hanging out with the youth of Athens. Or rather, the way he puts it, they're hanging around with him, right? They find him entertaining. Oh, cool. He goes around questioning all these people that are authority figures. The youth of Athens are very attracted to this, and so they follow him of his own volition. But nevertheless, those are his buddies. Those are the people he associates with. Where's he going with this? So I don't want to, become corrupt. If I hang out with corrupt people, I will become corrupt. Who do I hang out with? The youth. So he's basically saying there's no way I would corrupt them, at least knowingly. Why not? Because if I corrupt the youth, right, it'll bounce off and stick to me, right? And so there's no way I would do it knowingly. Maybe unknowingly. Maybe I'm doing it and I'm not aware of it. But if that's the case, then what should you do? If I'm doing this unknowingly, should I be brought to court with charges, or what is the better way to approach the situation, according to Socrates? So, either I'm not corrupting the youth, or I'm doing it unknowingly. If I'm not corrupting the youth, you need to drop the charges. If I'm doing it unknowingly, well, then what? Then what should you do? Well, not persecute them. Shouldn't it be more reasonable than that?
Not educate him, but to...
Well, kind of, yeah.
To train him, to teach him how not to corrupt him.
Right, pull me aside, right? Pull me aside. I mean, if somebody's got good intentions, and they mean well, but they're just not doing the right thing, you don't, execute them or take them. You tell them, hey, look, you're not supposed to do that. See what you're doing? You're having a corrupt influence on the youth. And then, of course, Socrates is a good, reasonable man. Oh, I am? Oh, well, let me see here. Okay, I'll stop then. Right? So that's how I approach it. I think this is a pretty crappy argument, to be honest with you. Here's the deal. Maybe it's valid, but I don't think it's sound, because it's based on some premise that you would never knowingly corrupt the people you associate with. Is that true? That nobody would knowingly be a corrupt influence on the people they associate with. Were that it were true. In fact, I guess this is a bit modern. It's more modern than this, but if you think like Machiavelli, anybody ever read the Machiavelli? Familiar with Machiavelli, the prince? So it's all about corruption. If you want power, if you want influence, you've got to be willing to corrupt and do anything and double cross everybody, right? Of course, he's the father of political science. And I think the Greeks, when they're thinking politics, especially Plato and Aristotle, politics and ethics sort of go hand in hand. But for Machiavelli, if I'm a politician, I don't have to be ethical. In fact, I shouldn't be ethical. If I have values, those get in the way of my plans for domination. And so, of course I'm going to corrupt my associates. They might not know I'm corrupting them, but I'm going to do it knowingly. And so, again, I think this is based on some false premise and a pretty crappy argument. I think he should have just sort of left it where it was standing when he was showing how Meletus just said anything. Everybody corrupts the youth. Everybody improves the youth except for you. Looks like he's willing to say whatever it takes to get Socrates in trouble, whether or not it's ridiculous, whether or not it's based in fact. And this isn't the end with Meletus, though, right? He's not off the hot seat yet, because Socrates claims, according to Meletus, according to his own testimony, he can't be believed, even by himself. He's basically saying the guy's contradicting himself. How is Meletus contradicting himself? This is where he asks Meletus to be more specific, I guess, to spell out exactly what he means when he says that Socrates is impious. He asks him, so do you think that I am teaching of new spiritual things, or is it that I don't believe in the gods at all, right? I'm not respecting the gods, or I don't believe in them. Which one is it, Meletus? What does he say at this point? This is like kind of halfway through. Meletus says what? Is it that Socrates doesn't respect the gods, or is it that he doesn't believe in them? He doesn't believe. That's what he says at this point. So Socrates is being charged with atheism here, right? So you're an atheist, Socrates, which means what? You're an atheist.
You believe in
You don't believe in the existence of any god, or whether it's all the Greek gods or just the monotheistic conception. You just don't believe in deities, right? So how does he trap Meletus here? How does he slip him up? Well, remember, one of the things that Meletus was saying about Socrates towards the beginning of the dialogue was that he teaches of new spiritual teachings, right? Spiritual things. So how does Meletus spell this out, right? He says, look, so you're contradicting yourself. You're saying I'm an atheist, and yet I teach of new spiritual things. Well, if I'm teaching of new spiritual things, Socrates thinks if he's doing this, he must believe in them. But what are spirits? What are spiritual things? Okay, there's two options. According to Socrates, maybe there's more, right? But according to Socrates, we got a choice to make, right? Either spiritual things are gods. Here we go. Spiritual things. They're either gods or what? Nobody knows their Greek mythology? So you've got the Titans, who are sort of like, the older gods, and then you got the Olympian gods, sort of the second generation. But you've got other deities or spiritual things that are not quite fully gods, demigods, I guess you would say, right? But how does he phrase it here? I like this. He doesn't say demigods. He says the bastard children of gods, right? Well, they were bastard children, right? Zeus was no father figure. He came down and had his fun, and then he left the poor maiden laying there in a field, thinking, "Why did I just get raped by a dove? What the heck was that? What was that all about?" I didn't know it was Zeus. It looked like a dove and it attacked me, and now I'm pregnant, and Hera is out to get me, Zeus's wife. So we've got this dichotomy. They're either gods. Spirits are either gods, or they're the children, the bastard children of the gods. Okay, well, let's just say that I believe in the children of the gods. Can I believe in the children of the gods and not believe in the gods themselves? No. Impossible, okay, says Socrates, right? If I believe in the children of the gods, I have to believe in the gods. So whether or not spiritual things are gods or children of the gods, I'm not an atheist. I believe in at least some spirits or some gods. So Meletus is contradicting himself when he says that I, Socrates, am an atheist, and yet I teach or believe in spiritual things, whether they're new or old or whatever. So that's pretty much it on the defense, right? Kind of a short defense. minutes. It only takes up half the dialogue. The rest of it is him sort of, kind of pontificating. We've got, his account of the investigations. I just have a bad reputation. I was just trying to figure out what the oracle meant, right? I'm not being impious. If anything, I'm doing my duty to the god. As far as corrupting the youth, we can see that Meletus is just saying whatever it takes to get me in trouble. He doesn't care about the youth. He's not concerned with their welfare. He thinks everybody improves them. What does he know about improving the youth? What he's saying is ridiculous, right? And he's even contradicting himself. He's not being consistent in his accusations. So again, the guy's just saying whatever it takes to get me in trouble, says Socrates. Well, what do you think? We start winding down here. We get the verdict. Guilty, not guilty. What is he found?
Guilty.
Of course, he's guilty, right? Okay, at least that's what they're going to say. And I really think the tone changes slightly once we get closer to the end. Once he realizes that he's going to be facing his death pretty soon. But he doesn't seem very, at least his words don't indicate that he is scared of dying. He's not fearful of death. And there's a lot that he says about death in the second half of the dialogue, which is very interesting and really needs to be unpacked. Let's read here at the bottom of page 93, if you got the book. If you've got a different copy, 28b, a couple lines down in the margin. Now, someone might say, are you not ashamed, Socrates, to have followed the kind of occupation that has led to your being now in danger of death? However, I should be right to reply to him. You are wrong, sir, if you think that a man who is any good at all should take into account the risk of life or death. He should look to this only in his actions, whether what he does is right or wrong, whether he is acting like a good man or a bad one. According to your view, all the heroes who died at Troy were inferior people, especially the son of Thetis, who was so contemptuous of danger compared with disgrace. When he was eager to kill Hector, his goddess mother warned him, as I believe, in some such words as these, "My child, if you avenge the death of your comrade Patroclus, and you kill Hector, you will die yourself, for your death is to follow immediately after Hector's." Hearing this, he despised death and danger, and was much more afraid to live a coward who did not avenge his friends. "Let me die at once," he said, "when once I have given the wrongdoer his deserts, rather than remain here, a laughing stock by the curved ships, a burden upon the earth." Do you think he gave thought to death and danger? The truth is this, gentlemen of the jury: wherever a man has taken a position that he believes to be best, or has been placed by a commander, there he must, I think, remain and face danger, without a thought for death or anything else rather than disgrace. Right? So, in a sense, he's comparing his stance on death to Achilles' stance on death, the son of Thetis, as he refers to him here. What is the story of Achilles? Pretty much gives it to you there, but Achilles, he's the guy that the whole book is pretty much about. If you read the Iliad, he's kind of the main guy. It all starts with his wrath. Achilles is angry because Agamemnon took away his favorite slave girl, right? And because he's really ticked off with Agamemnon, "Hey, you took away my favorite girl, I'm not fighting for you," and neither is my whole battalion, right? And so that turns the tide of the battle, right? The Greeks started to lose, the Trojans started to win, because remember, Achilles is this badass, right? He's this ultimate warrior guy. And so his friend Patroclus is killed, right? Patroclus is his best buddy and says, "I'm sorry, Achilles, I gotta go fight. I can't watch my fellow Greeks get slaughtered. I've gotta go fight." And Patroclus goes to fight and dies. Now Achilles says, "Geez, I guess I've got to go put my battle gear back on. I've got to avenge Patroclus' death." But here comes Thetis, right? His mother, who was a child of the gods, right? She's part deity. And she tells him, right? "Don't do it, Achilles. You'll win, you'll get your revenge, but right afterwards you will die too, and I don't want you to die, so don't do it." What does Achilles say? Odysseus sees Achilles. He asks Achilles, so what do you think? Would you go back and do it again? Or are you happy with your decision? What does Achilles say? He says, hell no, I'd rather be a sheep herder my whole life and just live a boring, dull life than be in this wretched place, right? So, again, he doesn't talk about that part of Achilles, right? I guess just the heroic Iliad Achilles. Well, anyway, I think the point he's trying to make here, though, is that death itself is not something we should really be concerned with, right? That seems like quite a bit to swallow. What we should care about is living a good life and doing what we believe in and what we believe is right. That is what our main concern should be, is being a good person, doing the right thing, not with our own mortality even. And so, it sounds very noble, I suppose. What is his position when it comes to politics, though, do you think? How does he look on the political way of life? I mean, he wasn't very nice to the politicians, but you might think maybe he could have been a reformist and been a public figure and tried to change things with his political power. What's his attitude towards that form of life? Did you get this out of the dialogue? What does he say about life and politics? Is that the life a philosopher can lead? Why not?
Because his job wasn't to convince other people to believe the way that he believed, but to question constantly what they believe.
Right, and so I guess what you're saying implies that that's exactly what a politician does.
That's exactly what a politician
tries to convince you to believe what they want you to believe, not necessarily what's the truth, right? And sometimes not even really what's best for you or the society, right? We're not going to read the Republic at all. Well, we'll read a little section out of it, but there's a metaphor Socrates uses that's kind of, I would say, very unflattering towards politicians. He talks about the work of the politician. It's almost like somebody who owns this unpredictable beast that they have in a cage. It's just really erratic. It's hard to control. But then after you've had this beast in a cage for long enough, you start to realize what noises calm it down, what gestures calm it down, and which ones make it angry, right? So don't make those gestures and take it off, right? Don't say the taxes word, right? You're going to raise taxes, don't say that. Don't start, say this instead, right? Come up with a different way of putting it. Not torture, but enhanced interrogation techniques, right? Because they don't like torture, that's medieval. Oh, but enhanced interrogation technique, right? We've got to use the proper language. We've got to say the right thing to the right people, too. Because some people like that. They've seen 24, so they're, torture them. You got to do that sometimes to get what you... So it depends on where you're at. I guess there's different beasts in different cages, but he's talking about it as if it had nothing to do with really the truth of the matter. It's just dealing with this mass of people, which is unpredictable, and saying what you can to calm them down. And so he doesn't think that a public life, a life of politics, is really going to work if you're a philosopher, at least what he considers a philosopher. If I'm going to look for truth and wisdom, then a public life is not the life for me, right? I need to do what I've been doing and go to people privately, individually, and try to talk to them about these things that are important, about living a good life and seeking justice and what exactly that means, right? That's how I do it, right? And I can't be afraid of death, right? As he puts it, this is not wisdom. If I want to be wise, I can't really fear death. On 95, he says something rather striking. This is 30D in the column, in the margin, 30D, about 2 lines up, but page 95. He says, neither Meletus nor Anytus can harm me in any way. So his accusers, Meletus, they cannot harm me. Okay, that's kind of, they can't? Aren't they going to put you to death? He could not harm me, for I do not think it is permitted that a better man be harmed by a worse. Certainly he might kill me, or perhaps banish or disenfranchise me, which he and maybe others think to be a great harm. But I do not think so. I think he is doing himself much greater harm doing what he's doing just now, attempting to have a man executed unjustly. Indeed, gentlemen of the jury, I am far from making a defense now on my own behalf, as might be thought, but on yours, to prevent you from wrongdoing by mistreating the God's gift to you by condemning me. Now, he sounds a little arrogant there himself, right? For if you kill me, you will not easily find another like me. Okay, so I'm going to read the rest of that in a minute, but what does he say here? A good man cannot be harmed, especially by a worse man? You know, what if Gandhi walks across the street and gets run over by Hitler? Good man got harmed by a worse man, right? So obviously what he's saying is it just is false in one sense, but maybe he means it differently than literally.
I think what he's saying is he does not fear death, but that's not the worst that could happen to him.
Yeah, I know, but I can't think of anything worse for anybody but death, right? It's like, I lived at least, but death, that's pretty much like, you lost, you died, right? That's the end of the video game, right, after all that. But he's talking about, well, you've been wanting to say, go ahead.
Yeah, doesn't he mean like spiritually? Like you might be talking like in a religious matter?
Right. So that's what I was looking for, exactly. There's this distinction between physical harm, and if he's talking about physical harm, obviously wrong, right? A bad guy can harm a good person, it happens all the time, right? But he's got this sense of spiritual harm, okay? So my body might be affected, my physical body, but I've got this other aspect of me that's more important, which you might call what?
Soul.
His soul, right? Okay. This is what he's talking about, and really, I think with Socrates, with Plato, this word takes on a more I don't know, metaphysical is the right word, but it takes on a different significance than it had previously taken. I mean, to the Greeks, this word would just sort of mean that which animates, that we have something in us that animates us, that moves our body, and that's it. That's its function, right? With Plato, with Socrates, apparently, we get a much more subtle and a much more personal view of the soul. And Socrates seems to think that this aspect of us is what is essential. This is what's important, is our soul. Our body, not so much. It's the soul that's important. And if we're good, if we live a good life, if we're just, then apparently this is bulletproof, right? This cannot be harmed. So although you might not see it when you first read it, there's some metaphysics going on here. He might not be using any arguments to prove his metaphysics, but he's making some assertions. You know, a good man cannot be harmed by a worse man. He's making these assertions that rely on metaphysical assumptions. You had a question?
I think it's like, I took it core as sort of like a reputational thing, because, you know, if he's the good man, he's going to stay the good man at the end.
Right.
Versus, you know, whenever the worst man comes, you know.
Yeah, and I think some of the things he says towards the end too, when he says something to the effect like, "You people who accused me, it's going to take a while, but you're going to have a bad reputation in a few years, right? Some of the people that were, into me, Plato maybe, they're gonna write the story of Socrates, and you aren't going to look so good."
And it's true, because
and
we
it's
don't
true.
study Meletus.
Right.
Socrates.
We're studying Socrates now. We probably wouldn't have if he would have done what a typical Athenian would have done.
Well,
Pleaded for his, please don't hurt me, please. But the fact that he did this and died
no, yeah.
made us remember, right? Made us remember, wow, this guy was willing to kind of put his neck out for this truth that he didn't even really know the full scope of, He was that into wisdom and truth. I think there's sort of a double meaning going on here. I think that you could be right and we're both be. Obviously, I think when we read dialogues like Phaedo, when he gets into the soul and starts talking about the soul, you know what's up. He's talking about the care for the soul as being so important, right? And also, when you use the word reputation, it's iffy. We'll see when we get to Credo, right? Because that doesn't seem like a big concern of his rep, or what people will think about him. But he does say some things that tend to contradict that here and there, right? So maybe he's not completely consistent on this. Okay, well, where was I? I haven't finished that passage yet. This is the famous Gadfly metaphor where we left off, right? He says, I was attached to this city by the god. He's talking of Apollo, I'm assuming, right? It seems to be a ridiculous thing to say, but I was attached to the city by the god as upon a great and noble horse, which was somewhat sluggish because of its size, and it needed to be stirred up by a kind of gadfly. It is to fulfill some such function that I believe that God has placed me in the city. I never cease to rouse each and every one of you, to persuade and reproach you all day long, and everywhere I find myself in your company. So who's been around horses, or maybe just cattle? What's a gadfly?
Like a little pesky fly that just keeps biting on the horses.
Yeah, it just kind of stings it on the rear, and
Yeah.
usually they'll use their tail to kind of swat it, and it'll fly away and then come right back to the same spot, right? So there's Socrates. I guess that's not the most flattering thing to compare yourself to, but I guess he's sort of being honest. I know I'm an annoyance. I know I'm ticking you off, but Athens, you've become this. It's a noble steed, but you've become sluggish, right? You become lazy, and I need to stir you up, right? So, skipping over a lot here, right? He keeps making these points about politics, right? A man leading a just life has to lead a private, not a public life. What about here on 97, where he gets to decide what he thinks the penalty should be. So they've decided he's guilty. Meletus and Meletus and Lyson, they think he should be executed, right? That's what they think the penalty should be. But he gets to decide what he thinks the penalty should be, and the jury has to vote on it. So what does he decide is the penalty should be?
Did you say something about a big meal?
Yes. That's the first thing he says, right?
Yes.
Free meals in the Prytaneum, right? What is this? Looking at page 97, 36b, 3 or 4 lines down. He assesses the penalty at death. So be it. What counter-assessment should I propose to you, gentlemen of the jury? Clearly it should be a penalty I deserve. And what do I deserve to suffer or to pay? Because I have deliberately not led a quiet life, but have neglected what occupies most people: wealth, household affairs, the position of general or public orator, or the other offices, political clubs, and factions that exist in the city today. I thought myself too honest to survive if I occupied myself with those things. I did not follow the path that would have made me of no use either to you or to myself. But I went to each of you privately, and I conferred upon him what I say is the greatest benefit, by trying to persuade him not to care for any of his belongings before caring that he himself should be as good and as wise as possible, not to care for the city's possessions more than for the city itself, and to care for other things in the same way. What do I deserve for being such a man? Some good, gentlemen of the jury, if I must make an assessment according to my deserts, and something suitable. What is suitable for a poor benefactor who needs leisure to exhort you? Nothing is more suitable, gentlemen, than for such a man to be fed in the Prytaneum, much more suitable for him than for any of you who has won a victory at Olympia with a pair or a team of horses. The Olympian victor makes you think yourself happy. I make you be happy. Besides, he does not need food, but I do. So if I must make a just assessment of what I deserve, I assess it as this: free meals in the Prytaneum. What's he basically saying here?
That he needs medication.
Well, no, he wants food. Not necessarily, but where's the Prytaneum? So the Olympic victor gets to hang out there. It's this hall. It's this hall where, if I'm this Olympian hero, if I go to the Olympics and I win the race, the chariot race, right? What happens when I get back to Athens? They put me up in the Prytaneum. I get to eat free meals. I get all the belly dancers with the feather fans feeding me grapes, right? Wine, whatever, right? So what is he saying here? What should I be punished with for what I've done? Basically, he's saying, kiss my ass, I think. Basically what he's saying, right? More eloquently than that, but he's saying, look, what should I be given for doing what I've done? I should be put on a pedestal, right? You guys should feed me. I've helped you. I've benefited your city. You don't see that, right? Whenever the guy wins at the Olympics, he makes you think that you're happy. I actually make you distinctions between two types of happiness, right? Let's update this. Your favorite team wins. Are you happy? Right, you can go party, have fun. Well, yeah, the Spurs won. Right, from San Antonio. Spurs, you know? I think it's almost over for them. Dynasty is over. But, you know, you're happy they win. How long does that last?
Until the next season.
Yeah, well, heck, you're lucky to the next season. Jeez. Wow, I want to get some of what you're on, man. The whole postseason, you're fine, you're cool, and you're happy. Usually it's like the next day, you know, you wake up and you go back to work and you do your job, you know, whatever. You're no longer happy like you were when they won the game last night. Probably hungover too. Just like, oh, jeez, yeah, go Spurs. But it's a fleeting happiness, right? It's not permanent happiness, right? So Socrates is looking for something more permanent. And I think, you know, he thinks if I live a good life, if I live the just life, I'll find this happiness somehow. I'll find this balance. And so if I can bring this happiness to you, then you should kiss my butt, right? Put me on a pedestal. Give me free meals at the Prytaneum. And he says here, look, I can't stop doing what I'm doing. If you gave me an offer and said, look, go away, Socrates. We're going to go ahead and forget that you even did any of this. We're going to drop the charges. But you got to stop asking questions, man. You're shaking things up and you got to be quiet. Well, what would he say to that?
No.
I can't do it, right? I can't do this, he said. Sorry. Perhaps someone might say, this is page 98, but Socrates, if you leave us, will you not be able to live quietly without talking? Well, this is the most difficult point on which to convince some of you. If I say it's impossible for me to keep quiet because that means disobeying the God, you will not believe me and you'll think I'm being ironical. On the other hand, if I say that it is the greatest good for a man to discuss virtue every day and those other things about which you hear me conversing and testing myself and others, for the unexamined life is not worth living for man, you will believe me even less. This quote here, the unexamined life is not worth living, probably the most widely quoted of Socrates, right? And usually it gets credited to Socrates. They give him credit for this, not Plato, even though Plato wrote it. The unexamined life is not worth living. In other words, what is he saying? If the unexamined life, what kind of life would that be? What would the examined life look like?
Because life ignorance is not nothing compared to a life of well-informed happiness.
Right, okay, so if I can't, okay, so for him happiness is...
Constantly questioning, constantly examining.
He's not, yeah. In fact, he might not ever find absolute happiness, right? But as long as he's living a life pursuing truth and asking questions, examining things, right, he'll be happy. But a life where he's not allowed to examine things, an unexamined life, where he isn't able to question things, when he isn't able to try to seek truth, for him, it's not worth living, right? And so I might as well be dead if I'm not doing this, right? I might as well be some plant that's just vegetating, right? If I can't question, if I can't seek truth. So, again, more concerned with truth than he is with his own mortality. And this, he keeps, pushing this point about death, right? Skipping over a lot, but he says towards the end there, page 99 at the bottom, he says, look, let's think about it this way. Perhaps death isn't that bad of a thing. We act like it is. We fear it as if it was the worst. But he says it's one of two things, and either one of those options is not so bad. Right, it's either nothing, right? You just die and it's just the end of all sensation and all experience, or it's your soul is transferred to somewhere else, right? And maybe you go to Hades, like they say, right? If it's just nothing, if you just die, he says, that's okay, right? That's not bad. It's even better than life, kind of. What is he? He makes this analogy about dreams, right? He says, so if death is something like a dreamless sleep, you know, you go to sleep and you wake up and you didn't have any dreams, and you just don't remember them. You don't remember anything, right? You just went to bed and there you are. You woke up. And if you put all those nights of dreamless sleeping together, just threw them all together, and you stack those up against all the bad times you had in your life and all the bad dreams that you had, which one would you rather deal with? He thinks the peaceful, sleep, the dreamless sleep, right? So if death is something like that, then perhaps it's a nice, peaceful state. It's fine, right? But if it's my soul going somewhere else, that's also kind of cool, because what does that mean? What's Socrates going to be doing in Hades? Right, I get to go question Achilles and all the heroes at Troy, right? And maybe get kicked out of Hades for this. Right? So, actually, there is a couple passages I want to read here before I close up the apology. Let's back up a little bit. Page 98, right? This is after he hears the sentence that he's going to die, right? He knows that he's being executed pretty shortly. And he says, "It is for the sake of a short time, gentlemen of the jury, you will acquire the reputation and guilt in the eyes of those who want to denigrate the city of having killed Socrates, a wise man. For they will say that I'm wise even if I am not." If you'd waited a little while, this would have happened of its own accord. You see my age, and that I'm already advanced in years and close to death. I'm saying this not to all of you, but to those who condemn me to death. And to those same jurors I say, perhaps you think that I was convicted for lack of such words as might have convinced you, if I thought I should say or do all that I could to avoid my sentence. Far from it. I was convicted because I lacked not words, but boldness and shamelessness, and the willingness to say to you what you would most gladly have heard from me. Lamentations and tears, and my saying and doing many things that I say are unworthy of me, but that you were accustomed to hear from others. I did not think then that the danger I ran should make me do anything mean, nor do I now regret the nature of my defense. I would much rather die after this kind of defense than live after making the other kind. Neither I nor any other man should, on trial or in war, contrive to avoid death at any cost. Indeed, it is often obvious in battle that one could escape death by throwing away your weapons and turning to supplicate one's pursuers. And there are many ways to avoid death in every kind of danger, if one is willing to venture to do or say anything to avoid death. It's not difficult to avoid death, gentlemen of the jury. It is much more difficult to avoid wickedness, for it runs faster than death. Slow and elderly as I am, I've been caught by the slower pursuer, whereas my accusers, being clever and sharp, have been caught by the quicker, wickedness. I leave you now condemned to death by you, but they are condemned by truth to wickedness and injustice. So I maintain my assessment, and they maintain theirs. This perhaps had to happen, and I think it is, as it should be. So, easier to avoid death if you're willing to do or say anything than it is to avoid wickedness. True, false, in some cases. You think he's right about this? So it's easier to avoid dying than it is to avoid being bad?
Not really, I guess.
So yeah, if I want to live a good moral life and always do the right thing, he says, that's a lot more difficult than just trying to live. I think in a sense, yeah, he's right. I mean, I guess in the long run, doesn't death always win, right? We all die, right? So we can't escape it. It's inevitable. But I think, if we're willing to sort of do and say anything and lead and follow the leader, right, I guess it's easier to live and to survive than, I guess, taking a stand against, the system or whatever, the man, if you're Socrates, right? So I guess he's got a point here. But, we'll see when we get to people like Heidegger and Nietzsche, right? They seem to think, God, this guy must have hated life so much if he thinks this way about death, right? And maybe we shouldn't listen to him because of it, right? But let's finish up here. Let's let him have his last word. This is the last passage there at the end of the reading, right? more reflections on death, right? times, right? There it is again. Good man is not harmed, period, basically. Life or death, right? As long as he's good. Right? What has happened to me now has not happened of itself, but it is clear to me that it was better for me to die now and to escape from trouble. That is why my divine sign did not oppose me at any point. So apparently Socrates has this voice in his head, calls it his divine sign, and it usually tells him when he's doing something naughty that he shouldn't be doing, right? The voice of conscience, perhaps, right? I know a lot of theologians have made a big deal about this, but so he feels fine for what he said. I'm certainly not angry with those who convicted me or with my accusers. Of course, that was not their purpose when they accused and convicted me, but they thought that they were hurting me, and for this they do deserve blame. This much I ask from them. When my sons grow up, avenge yourselves by causing them the same kind of grief that I caused you. If you think that they care for money or anything else more than they care for virtue, or if they think they are somebody when they are nobody, reproach them as I reproach you, that they do not care for the right things and they think they are worthy when they are not worthy of anything. If you do this, I shall have been justly treated by you and my sons also. Now the hour to part has come. I go to die, you go to live. Which of us goes to the better lot is known to no one except for the God. So there he goes, leaving the jury, and we see, the story continues in credo. But I want to go over what might be some of the main themes of this reading. What is the moral of the story? I think there's at least two main themes kind of going on here in the apology. But I also want to ask this question, right? He seems to think it's unwise to fear death. Why is it unwise to fear death? Yeah, that might, he doesn't seem to say that that's why. Well, we all die, so why fear it? It's something you got to deal with. He seems to think it's unwise to fear it because, right, it's acting like you know when you don't know. Just like the politicians, they said they knew when they didn't know, right? Has anybody in here ever died before? No, I haven't either. So I don't know what it's like, right? And so then he's got a point here. There's a pretty funny Monty Python skit where, this week on Is There, we're going to ask the question, is there life after death? Our guests are all recently deceased. It shows all these dead people sitting around. Here's Dr. blah, blah, blah. His tongue's all sticking out. He's all cross-eyed. So, doctor, is there life after death? And he just sits there. And they ask all of them. They're all silent. Nothing to say. So, I guess we've discovered there is no life after death. No comment by all of them. So, we'll take that as a negative, But, they're being silly. But, Socrates is sort of making the same point. We don't know, so why fear what we don't know? But is that really a good argument? Is it unwise to fear the unknown? Let's say you're on some sadistic game show and you've got, different doors to choose from, right? One of the doors has, rabid pit bulls behind it or something, and the other one will shoot all these poison daggers at you, and the other one's a Ferrari, right? Is it unwise to be a little nervous and scared and fearful when you're making that choice to which door to open, right? And if death is this door, right, there's a lot more than three, right? Yes, you can take a class in world religion just to hear about all the different options might be possible, what people believe at least, right? So I don't know if this is a good argument either. Unwise to fear death because it's unknown. I don't know. And when we get to Heidegger, I think we'll have time for Heidegger, you'll see he seems to think that this knowledge of death, dealing with death, that we have to take it seriously. We can't be so flippant and nonchalant about it. Socrates is, because it's a very part of the way we are as humans. It's an element of sort of what he would call our ontological structure, but that's Heidegger speak. So we'll wait till the third unit to really get into that. And we'll see when we get to Nietzsche, right? He seems to think this guy was a pessimist, right? Did not like life. He sort of looked at life and said, this sucks, right? So I'd rather be dead, right? And so Nietzsche thinks, geez, a guy with that kind of attitude, I don't know if you're going to want to take advice about life from him, I think Nietzsche did admire him. I think that it's a bit oversimplistic to think he just rejects Socrates, but he does seem to think that this stance towards death is quite peculiar, and it was a fault of Socrates, not something we should live up to. I don't know, I guess we can debate that. But what do you think, though, if I had to take this reading and kind of boil it down to its essence, what would that essence be? What lesson are we supposed to learn when we read the Apology? If this was like one of Aesop's fables, Aesop's fables, right? You know the examples? The tortoise and the hare was one of Aesop. And there's the sun versus the wind, and the fox and the grapes, whatever. There are these little stories, usually animals are involved, and you're supposed to learn some lesson, right? I think if we divide this reading in half and just sort of treat one half as Socrates' defense, and the second half, him just sort of talking about the way one should live and the way one should sort of face death, I find sort of two main themes or two main theses, right? If we just take the account of Socrates' investigations, when he's talking about seeking out the meaning of the oracle's statement, what does the oracle mean when she says that there are none wiser than Socrates? What is the moral, do you think, of that story? Or is there one? What is the point, do you think? What are we supposed to learn from Socrates when he tells us of his journey to seek truth, to seek knowledge? Yeah, I think you have to ask questions. But before you even ask questions, you have to be aware
That you don't know.
Right. So if he thought he was smart, let's say he was an arrogant person. I think maybe he was, but maybe he's just really ironic. Maybe he's just being ironic and a smart ass, right? Sometimes it's hard to tell, right? But if we just take him at his word, anybody who was arrogant would have heard the oracle's statement and said, "Hell yeah, none are wiser than me. I'm pretty smart," right? But he didn't react that way. He was humble about it. He had some humility, and so he was able to say, and if he didn't have that humility, he never would have questioned in the first place. If you think you already know everything, are you going to go questioning people for the answers? No, because you already think you know everything, so why even ask them? They're idiots and you're the genius, right? So there's something ironic about this. In order to be wise, one has to know the limits of one's wisdom. One has to have a certain humility about one's knowledge, right? So I think he's saying, look, if you're going to learn, if you're going to get at the truth, this requires a bit of humility. And I think it's a point well taken here. I mean, if you really think about it, I think this is a big problem in academia. You get these professors who have big heads, or they're vain or whatever, and I've had this happen where you'll ask them a question they don't know the answer to, so what do they do? Sometimes they'll make up an answer, right? They'll just lie, right? And you catch them doing that, and you're like, really? What else are they lying about, right? They lose their credibility. And I think it's just sort of like we have this image that we want to present to our students, right? That we're just, we're the go-to person on our field, right? On our discipline. That we know all the answers to everything, right? And if we don't, then that reveals a weakness or something like that. So, I don't know. I mean, I remember as an undergraduate, I got into an argument with my anthropology teacher about Nietzsche, and he was saying stuff that was completely wrong. And I just dropped it, because it was him and the rest of the class versus me. But after that, I lost a lot of respect for the guy, and I was just sort of like, geez, whatever. But I think also this lack of humility is also a reason that students have problems in class. And I think some of you are quiet and you don't talk because maybe you're shy. You just don't like talking in public. Some of you maybe just don't give a crap. You're just trying to get through the class and get out of here as fast as possible. But I think some of you don't want to look stupid. You know, I know I've done that. You know, I want to say it, but I think I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll look dumb. You know? And then sometimes the teacher will say what I was going to say. I'm like, oh, I would have looked smart. I should have said it, right? And so it's okay not to know. It's okay to be grasping for the truth, right? We don't have to be embarrassed, right? Socrates yelled out to the world, I don't know anything, right? Show me what you know, right? And so again, if we're going to be honest about seeking the truth, seeking wisdom, we have to have this, right? We have to have this humility. Otherwise, we might end up with the appearance of wisdom, what might appear to be wisdom, but in reality, it's just the appearance, right? It's not genuine truth, genuine wisdom. Okay, so I think humility is a big deal here, a big theme in the writing and the apology. What else, though? Isn't there something else that's important? When he says the unexamined life is not worth living, right? I think that kind of boils down, for me, the other theme of this dialogue. What's the most important thing for Socrates, do you think? His life is not so important. His own mortality is not so important. To seek wisdom, right? To live the good life, and living the good life entails seeking wisdom, right? So seeking the wisdom, knowing truth, right? So I guess I'll just put both those words up here. Wisdom, which I guess has something to do with truth. If I'm wise, I know the truth, right? So there's got to be some relation to it. And seeking these is more important than, well, anything, right? Even my own life, my reputation, even taking care of my family, he says. I live in poverty. I can't even take care of my family because I do this. I seek wisdom. I just go around questioning people. Very extreme, but this is the life he says we must lead if we're a true philosopher, if we're a true lover of wisdom. And I think, he demonstrates that he's willing to go through with it, right? I mean, he talks about he knows that his investigations made him unpopular. He knows that he might have gotten himself in trouble. At the end of the dialogue, he reveals that, look, I know I could have said the right things and pleaded with you and got off the hook. I'm sure I could have. But I'm not going to do that. I care more about what's real, right? What's authentic, not with just impressing you with words and convincing you of things that are far from the truth. So, you think he does a decent job here, making his points? Any comments, questions, concerns? Because I want to move on to Credo. I don't have much time to get started on it, but at least get started. No? Y'all, who agrees with Aristophanes? Socrates is a bumbling buffoon. Nobody's, some people on the fence about it. I think so. I don't know if it's fair to start with the apology, because I think it kind of biases us towards Socrates a little too much. I think that's why I have to emphasize and mention Heidegger and Nietzsche here, because he comes off pretty noble. You're like, geez, maybe I couldn't have done that. I don't really agree with everything he says, but I admire the man for at least standing up for something the way that he did, right? So I think, for sure, like you were saying earlier, if he hadn't have done what he did, we wouldn't be talking about the guy right now, right? So even if you're thinking, God, what an idiot, I would have just kissed the jury's butt and gone home to my kids, Sure, but if he did that, we wouldn't be studying him in Philosophy 1301, right? Yeah, there might not even have been a Philosophy 1301.
I guess it's one of those things that just depends on what you value. I mean, he obviously didn't value like immediate, results,
Right.
Kiss the jury's butt or whatever. Like, I would have just because, I would have felt something about my family or something.
Right.
But, it's one of those things where if based on his values and seeing that truth was more important than, family and whatever.
Yeah.
It's like no surprise that this happened.
Right. Yeah, and I think that particular point you made about his attitude towards his family, this is, I think, one of the main things that people have problems relating to when they read Socrates, especially when we get to Credo, we read this Credo dialogue, his attitude towards Credo's pleas, hey, you got to think about your kids, and that doesn't seem to be the main concern he's dealing with in the dialogue, right? And so, but also, think about it this way. It's, this is a long time ago, is the attitude towards women and children in those books a lot of times? Like, how are they considered, like,
Proper.
right, they're what I own, right? And I want to brag about them, right? Look how many wives I have, or how many sons that I have are going to be my heirs, right? It's all about increasing your, family size. You have more power, you have more influence, and you got more progeny and all this, right? So, taking that into consideration, right? I think that's what he's really, I care about my sons and them being virtuous, and so when I die, you better teach them to live a good life and care for things in the right way. But they shouldn't be concerned with, oh, look at my big family and look at all my stuff, So to him, I think that's where the attitude comes from. Maybe if Socrates were transported to our time and we had a different conception of family, he might throw those in the same category as justice, living the life of the father, whatever, right? But at this point, it's all status. So for him, it's, what was the word you were using? It's not as permanent, it's fleeting or something like that, right? These are temporary, right? Yeah, more immediate, right? These are more immediate pleasures where there are these higher, more permanent, more eternal, as he puts it, pleasures or goods or whatever you want to call them. Right? So, okay, good. How much time do we have left? I don't even know.
A quarter till 10.
Oh, and we're supposed to be done at 9:50, is that right? Okay, well, we're not going to get started on Credo today, so, jeez. We spent too much time on the apology. But Credo's short. It won't take us long to get through. It's very short. I would go ahead and get started on those readings according to schedule, because next time we will get a good start on Plato's metaphysics, okay? So keep with the schedule, and I'll try to get caught up as best as I can. I suppose, though, if you didn't do a response to Credo, since we haven't really covered it yet, I guess the due date is extended now. So if you want to turn this in on Thursday, you still can. All right. See you guys Thursday.